we will open it up to public input. So let's get the show going.
Thank you, Katie, for that wonderful introduction and getting this thing on the road. So tonight, I'd just like to have a short presentation just to talk about some of the stances AS has taken lately in regards to student-run television, student media organizations, and then we'll open it up to public input, which Katie will manage. And within student media organizations, we'll talk about the context in which these decisions are made, media funding requirements, and the formation of the committee that will be reviewing our media funding bylaws. So student-run television is a service of the Associated Students. It's something that we fund in our executive budget. It's part of our student government, and it features a lot of content. We made a big transition this year where we allowed the show to essentially take editorial responsibility for everything it aired on TV. And this was kind of different than what the TV station has done in the past. In the past, it used to be some sort of public forum where the station was more of a resource for airing content. Now, we wanted to make SRTV the producers of that content, and they've been very successful at doing so. So the incident in question has to do with a Quality TV episode that aired in the previous Thursday night. This show was not properly authorized according to our standing rules and bylaws. A quote from our standing rules: all content to be aired on SRTV must be approved via a standard approval form authorized by the general managers and the EVP Student Services. Here I have a quote from a written statement from the, I'm getting a ton of emails lately. Just shut that down. Let's not comment on that.
Too late.
So here's a written statement from Tom Dorian and Ali, who are the general station managers. Essentially, they just repeat the same thing, how the show did violate the AS standing rules. So because of this violation, we decided to take it down. We didn't want content to be aired that is representing the views of our student association and the Associated Students to air without any sort of authorization. That's like having a newspaper and someone else comes in, titles it differently, adds their own cover story, and then publishes it without any of your own control. So we did shut down the station, and those are the kind of the two rules that kind of state within our own rules why we can do that. Essentially, it's vested in the Associate Vice President of Student Services in conjunction with the AS President. We can shut the station down at any point. So we do take responsibility for the content shown on the station. That's our fault. We do stand by the station, and we are going to work as hard and as fast as possible to bring the station back on air. We're going to do it with a brand new charter. It's going to be beautiful. We're going to start from scratch, and we're going to be working with the SRTV station managers from day one on producing this new charter. So we're working on it, myself, the Vice President of Finance, Peter Benesh, our Associate Vice President of Student Services, Meredith Madnick, and the two SRTV station managers. We're going to try to recommend as soon as possible, maybe even submit to the order of business tomorrow, a new charter for the station, but we do want to do it right, and the SRTV shutdown was supported by the overall AS Council last night at our meeting. AS Council took the viewpoint that it would be better to be responsible, figure out a good set of rules, figure out a new charter, and then bring the station back when we knew that all content on the show was authorized by the station managers, authorized by the Associated Students for display. So student media organizations, just a reminder of what we'll talk about. We'll talk about context, media funding requirements, and the formation of the special committee that would review our funding bylaws. So currently, as many of you are probably aware, the AS Council has a set of objective criteria we use to fund media organizations. It's important to make a point that the right to free speech is not necessarily equivalent to the right to receive funding. One media organization last night at our AS Council meeting said it themselves that the right to that funding was a privilege. and not a right. And that's a quote from an actual media organization that spoke at AS Council last night in support of the media freeze. But regardless of AS action on your funding, you are all still student organizations of the campus. You still have a right to free speech. You can still distribute and publish, but it would obviously require the use of your own funding at this time, while we do review our funding bylaws and how we systematically approach the issue of funding student organizations. So we are calling for a review of those objective criteria. We want to fund you. We want to fund you responsibly, and we will find a way to fund you responsibly. So we've been reviewing these bylaws. We've known that there's been a problem for these bylaws since the start of the academic year. You might have heard in The Guardian, our previous process, which it didn't work out so well. We should have included media organizations in the process from day one in the previous process, and that's what we're going to be doing today onwards. We froze the funding on Friday to allow a review of our system, to allow a review of what funding bylaws we use to fund student media organizations. And we did this because we saw really three main points of inadequacy in our current funding system that we could not ignore further, given the events on Friday. The first was that our current system of funding media organizations are not in line with the objectives of this association as they are stated in our Constitution. Our disclaimer, and you're probably all familiar with the disclaimer that we require to place on your second page of every publication, but we felt that the disclaimer was not adequately separating our association from the actual content that was featured in the publication. And also there has been, if you look at it, there's actually not much equity in funding for student media at this time. Some student media organizations take over a larger proportion of the funding than others, and we didn't see that system as being necessarily fair, given our limited set of resources that we have, that we possess, to fund all of you. So we've been looking at this issue for quite some time, and these are the inadequacies we've seen in our current funding system. So how are we going to figure out a new funding system that can remedy all of these problems and get you back on your feet with AS funding as soon as possible? We're going to be charging a committee that is going to review the new funding bylaws. The committee shall hold at least one additional public hearing regarding its findings. So this is one of the public hearings. The committee is going to meet, and it will hold another public hearing regarding its findings. And then the committee would make a recommendation to the AS Council, at which point the Council would deliberate on that recommendation from this committee. And of course, all AS Council meetings are also open to the public. So in charging a committee, you often have to look at the purpose for why you're charging it. And I know several drafts of the charge were leaked, unfortunately. What was important was we were trying to figure out, what is the best way to constitute a committee that could do what AS Council wanted to do, in terms of what type of recommendation we would like to see. Specifically, from this committee, we would like to see a recommendation that is based on the viewpoints of the media organizations and of the AS funding bylaws. So we're charging a committee that includes representatives from the Associated Students Council and from media organizations. So to chair this committee, it was very important to find a neutral standpoint, and someone I believe who possesses that is our Associate Vice President of Student Advocacy, Chris Cruz. He's right there in the red hat. I'd like to serve on this committee. As VP Finance, Peter would serve on the committee. As our Associate Vice President of Student Organizations, Andrew Ang would serve on this committee. We would choose 5 AS senators to serve on this committee. I've asked John Condello to serve on this committee. We'd ask for 5 representatives from the media organizations, which I believe Rose has already started the process in finding those representatives.